That's a bit better. Great. Good to see you. Haven't
Good to
seen you
see
for
you too.
ages. Mind you,
Yeah.
I've seen you in the web chats.
Yes, it's been a little while. Probably about 6 months or so.
All right. So we've probably got about 1,500 people watching us sooner or later.
Hello to all the 1,500 out there.
Yeah. Good on you, people, for following BSV. It's 9 a.m. here in New Zealand. What time is it? And where are you?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and it's 3 p.m.
3 p.m. All right. Great. Let's dial my camera a bit. I've got a bunch of questions that I want to ask you, you being somewhat well versed in what's going on with the promotion of BSV. What are you doing these days, Brett, with BSV?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much still in the same capacity. I'm the head of community for BSV blockchain and really just looking at ways that we can, grow the community, provide tools and resources, developer growth, help to build and bootstrap entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, as well as get educational information out there to the public.
All right. So you've been doing that work for a fair while.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's been 2.5 years or something like that. And yeah, the role has changed over that period of that 2.5 years, in some capacities here and there in terms of the scope and what I'm focused on. But the general essence of it has sort of remained consistent in terms of, bringing BSV to mass audiences.
One of the key things in my mind is how ready is BSV for a rapid uptake by millions of people? How confident are you that it can cope with that in traffic, not crash, provide enough without there being any sort of bottlenecks or anything like that, and function well with the security that's expected? How reliable is it?
Yeah, well, it's a really great question. And that is, it remains to be seen, in terms of how robust and reliable it is. I think what we can do is take some lessons that from the past in terms of how BSV has gotten to the place that it's at. So some of the past that we've covered already has been, on the one hand, we have the return of the original scripting language. So this was the back to Genesis upgrade for the SV Node software, and that re-enabled a lot of the shut-off opcodes that uh, BTC Core had disabled because they just didn't understand what its function was. One of the reasons why, especially when you get into the nitty-gritty between the differences between the BTC and the BSV communities and their approach and their considerations for the role of blockchain is, on the one hand, you have, okay, it's just a store of value. It's just a asset that has a price that's ascribed to it. That price just so happens to be in fiat, but they claim to be, really focused on, on-chain economies and Bitcoin itself, when in reality, what they're doing is they're really evaluating the success of their product based on whether or not it has been absorbed, and it's worth more in the fiat world. So it's very much just looked at as, basically just a like a way to accelerate your fiat earnings,
So it's
as
investment.
opposed to.
It's speculative investment mostly, but store
Yeah,
of value has been the emphasis. Michael Saylor seems to be saying that.
exactly. And then they really want to benchmark that growth, the success, on the fiat economy that they're supposed to be replacing, right? So why are you so excited if
Right.
all of a sudden someone told you that, today I'm giving you 10 paper clips and tomorrow I'm giving you 30 paper clips for this? Would you clap your hands and pat
Yeah.
yourself on the back? I mean, if the
Right.
paper clips are worth nothing
Yeah.
to
Right.
begin with, who cares
Right.
if you're getting an additional 20 of them?
Right.
So,
It's a
but
confidence racket.
that's their mentality.
It's a confidence racket. It's a sort of a Ponzi scheme where one person tells the other and they get excited and they say, well, you tell more and it'll go up. So it's the same sort of thing. It's all based on number goes up. It becomes more valuable. It's a store of value. It's better than gold, with no emphasis on actual functional transforming the world with a super cheap, super fast, super safe micro payment system that'll transform the internet. Now, again, coming back to the question of what evidence have we in small scale that BSV can cope with massive traffic if it suddenly picks up? Because it would only take Elon Musk to jump on it for X, the X platform, or maybe AWS, but particularly the social media ones, Facebook, for example. If they discovered BSV, if they've got brains, and they have got brains, and I've been teaching the AIs, Grok and ChatGPT and Copilot, I've been teaching them with question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, so that they would become aware of this as information to relay it to the public. It only needs someone like Elon Musk or Zuckerberg to jump on it, and if they interrogate the AI well enough, they will find the 5 main benefits of super cheap transactions, super scalability, and limited supply, which means your competitors are right up against you. And if you get in early, you can cut out your competitors and you can commandeer a large part of the market. Gives you a huge economic advantage. Anyway, those things, also the low energy, like 1/200,000th the energy per transaction that BTC does. If those things get out and get known by someone important like Musk or Zuckerberg, then I suspect it could be a very rapid rise. And I've been concerned about that. And that's why I've asked you technically, how confident are we, particularly what examples of existing applications have we had? I've seen from Satoshi's videos that there've been 1 million transactions per second, which is very good, demonstrating we can handle the traffic. But I'm interested in real life cases as well. So, like the meteorological one, farmers delivering information. I think that was one used. Is it still being used, that one?
Uh, that would be, yeah, that is Alexander Mann's program.
Okay, so that's
Yeah,
that's
that
that's
one's
big
still
scale.
being used and they've ramped it up.
Okay, so do you happen to know how many transactions they're doing a day on that?
Yeah, last I heard they were ramping it up, so I think that it was test case of around 5,000 transactions um per uh per every 5 minutes, I believe. And now
Okay,
I think
okay,
they've
okay.
they've updated that to about 10,000 transactions every 1 minute, I believe.
Okay, so is that the biggest? That's not. Is that the biggest scaling we've had so far? In
Yes,
real,
definitely it's among, I mean, there have been some test use cases and examples. We have some on-chain stuff. One of the things about on-chain is that it's fairly private. So you can see the transactions on chain, that there's data going on there, but you don't necessarily know what that data is assigned to. However, over the course of the holidays, right around Christmas time this year, we had a individual that was in one of the competitor communities. I think it might have been BCH, but maybe it was BTC. But he made a public post on social media and he was calling out, BSV and saying essentially, there's all these transactions on chain, but if you and they're tagged with this one specific tag. Maybe I can send it to you and we can add it to the description. But that they were saying that there's always a specific address where the return funds are going to. And so he was using this to hypothesize that this is a phony transaction, right?
okay,
Because you're seeing millions of transactions, but
yeah,
they're all going to the same output. In other words, what he's saying is that these funds are sort of spending themselves.
okay,
And so, I just happen to be seeing that while I'm scrolling by, and again, knowing nothing about it, I just said, well, that's one way to look at it. You can never discount something like that. I mean, who knows what people are using the blockchain for. But, another thing is that it is a public blockchain. So this could be related to timestamping data. You just have no understanding of what that data is related to. And then as I'm getting into it with this guy, it turns out that the developer for all these hundreds of millions of transactions, he sees our exchange online and he starts replying and he's actually saying, and so this guy's saying, well, this is all fake data. And he's going, I happen to know for a fact that you have no idea what you're talking about because this is my data and I'm the one that put all this on chain. And so like, yeah, I can tell you exactly who this is ascribed to. I believe it was, related back to the Dutch government because, that this was related to Mint Blue, which is a very famous blockchain company out of Europe, and they're putting, transactions on chain that help, so in Europe, they have all these problems with meeting these regulatory demands. They have to keep consumer data private, but they have to keep certain data public, and they have to provide a traceability of where, a digital passport product for where product has come from. So there's so much complexity there. How do you do all of that? And BSV is just the Swiss Army knife. I mean, it can do it all
So
at
this
scale.
is a consumer food product traceability. Okay.
That's right.
All right. So,
Yeah, that's right.
all right. So in this conversation, you've given me two examples. One is the meteorology information coming from farmers all over the US reporting so that the meteorological service can give a better weather forecast, and that has a major
Yes.
economic
And that was
benefit.
debuted in Washington, D.C., September of last year. You can look that up online. It was
Okay.
the first ever demonstration of blockchain utility at the invite of the House Speaker of Representatives.
How many months has it been going roughly?
That one has been going roughly around 9 to 12 months, I would say.
Okay. And the one in Europe for the food traceability?
Roughly the same, maybe slightly longer, I would
Okay,
say.
so that's the kind of example that I'm interested in hearing because it shows the practical usefulness of it and the economic benefit from it. Somewhat long-standing proof that it actually works and is still being used. Can you off the cuff give me one more by any chance? I don't expect you to, but what about
Yeah.
gaming? It's used in gaming, less important, but presumably gaming is using it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's opportunities for micro rewards in gaming. There's also opportunities for the ability to sync different stats to sync different leaderboards. So you could have different different systems that are distributed across the United States at different arcade locations. Like for example, think of a company like Dave and Buster's. So you could have an hourly reward for all Dave and Buster's instead of just, the ones in Miami versus the ones in South Carolina, et cetera.
Okay,
And so yeah, anything where public data can be used to verify information, BSV blockchain
good.
is a perfect fit.
Yeah, the significant thing you said at first there was micropayments because you can reward people with a small amount of money and it doesn't cost anything really to make that payment. If you pay through a bank, you pay 50 cents for a transaction, whatever. And the transformation of the world will be partly, well, largely perhaps, be because any payment anywhere to anyone in the world will cost maybe 100,000th of a cent. And that
That's
means
right.
you don't, if you want to pay someone 1 cent just to reward them with a click on Facebook or something, it becomes possible. And that opens up a whole new world of business. All right. So we've talked, just to summarize, we've talked about how credible BSV is actually working in the real world. And you've given me three examples, the meteorological one, the European delivery of consumer goods and foods and stuff in a way that is accountable. And the third one is the micropayments one, which doesn't just apply to that example you gave me of gaming, which is sort of playful, but it can also be on Facebook likes or X likes or whatever you want to do, transforming the ability of people to reward at almost no cost, in a small, humble amount, but it masses up if you have thousands of people doing it. And payment for small amounts of things like a litre of water going to a house or electricity or whatever it is. So those are the benefits. I'm still haunted by not yet being in the mass scale where we've got literally a million transactions per second. I know that MasterCard handles about 60,000 transactions per second, and BSV has been proven, at least in the workshop, to do 1 million transactions a second, even more, I think. It went to 2.5 at one point, I think, 2.5 million transactions a
Yes,
second.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it can get stretched to in the th three
okay,
to 4 million transactions range. Once you start to tip beyond 5 or 6 million transactions per second, you may have to re-engineer some of the architecture, according to lead architect Siggy Oscarsson. But for right now, in terms of just getting something up that can meet that level of demand, I liken it to the transition from dial-up internet. When dial-up internet first came around, the commercialization opportunity, everyone sort of saw that it was there, but what exactly it was, it wasn't immediately apparent. So a use case like, for example, Netflix, where now we can stream videos directly over our broadband connection, you couldn't really envision that when dial-up was the dominant,
too slow.
connecting platform that people were using, because you actually had to have a scale up of the infrastructure and the
Right,
architecture that
right.
that served that data before the commercialization became immediately apparent. And as soon as broadband became universal across the globe, you immediately saw a night and day shift in the mindset and the focus of how to commercialize that technology. And
Okay.
we're basically seeing the exact same thing with blockchain right now. Blockchain is, it's more disruptive than the internet itself. This is the
Yeah,
ultimate tool
yeah,
for auditing and tracking and
yeah.
tracing information. And the utility that that has is across the board. It's not just in the entertainment sector. It's not just in the financial services sector. This is every single industry is going to be impacted by the developments of blockchain technology. And what it will do is it will reintroduce the concept of Adam Smith's specialization and distribution of services to the digital age. So now you're going to be able to have things like AI agents that are able to collect and collate specific queries and data for you. While you may have other features and functions, pay as you go with this new micropayments technology. But all of that is, we're right on the precipice of this coming into focus, because we are right on the precipice of actually the scale up of the infrastructure and architecture that's necessary for
Okay,
that.
I'm curious. I think some of our audience will be interested in too, in being a little clearer on why the BSV network transforms the whole internet. What difference is it from today's internet? I know that the BSV network can not only convey money from one person to the other, but blocks of data of any kind, video, text, audio, whatever it is. But why would the whole world switch over to the BSV network? What's the difference between the BSV network and the existing network? Why is it going to be so much better?
Well, I think I'll just maybe turn that question around and just say, well, we had the ability to chisel information on rocks, and why would we switch to quills and paper, and it's just about economies of scale. It's just about, all BSV is just another way to record data and to record provenance and to have immutability for and auditability for that data. And yeah, we chiseled things on rocks and we've carved them on trees and things, but there's loss associated with those methods of preserving data. They become hard to transit. If I record my grocery list on a stone tablet, first of all, it takes me a while to chisel it out, and
Yeah.
second of all, when I traveled in with it in the car, it's difficult for me to access it. So all BSV really is just the evolution of the way to preserve data. And why it's so innovative and why it's so useful. I don't know if you saw this, but Apple Pay went down just a couple days ago. So the entire Apple Pay system was down. We've seen things like attacks on Cloudflare. We've seen attacks on CrowdStrike, and we've seen Google itself go down. And what people start to realize is, it's all well and good when you have your security system for your home. Let's say you have an automated gate that, opens and closes when you give a password or something like that. And that's all being run by Google. And then all of a sudden, Google's servers all go down globally,
Okay. So what
worldwide.
you're saying is you're talking about the idea of decentralizing the storage of data. In the present day
And
internet,
accessibility.
it's corporations that store all the information. But when it's stored in the blockchain, it's different because nobody particularly owns it. Where is it stored?
Exactly. And in the exact same way as cloud services, right? We have cloud data now. Instead of it just being stored on my physical hard device, I can access it from multiple different devices because the data is at a higher level, at an abstract, and it creates more accessibility. So it's
Is
not
it?
just about where that
Oh,
data is stored, it's also about how that data is accessed. And when you include things like identity protocols, so the ability to have an identity certification that allows me to sort of access data that only I'm allowed to see, from different devices, whether I'm on a library computer or whether I'm on, a personal device. That is the level of, efficiency that BSV blockchain can very easily
Yeah,
provide.
I'm still trying to understand where exactly, if I send an image, a photograph of a friend to somebody in the internet of the future, where is it stored? I know at the moment it might be stored within Google or it might be stored within uh, Facebook or somewhere in a centralized place. Where is it stored in the future world of BSV, where I sent it on the blockchain, sending it through the BSV network? Where specifically does it get stored? If it's not in Google, not in Facebook, not in Amazon, where is it stored?
Yeah, and remember, we're talking about being on the precipice of a technological revolution. So
Yeah.
where exactly is it going stored? We can hypothesize where it's going to be stored today, but there's room for businesses to grow and to accept that. But let me paint a picture for you to say how a business would potentially be able to monetize the storage of that data. So when, nowadays when we send packets of information across the internet, there's no money attached to that packet of information. We just have to hope by God's goodwill that this packet's going to get all the way across. And for the most part, the swim lanes are set up so that, when we Zoom together, my information is streaming to you, your information is streaming to me. But now imagine that when we're sending our information, even if it's high definition 4K, real time content that we're filming in the moment, we can also be attaching 1/10,000th, 1/100,000th of this in this data stream, so that yes, it's being how it's being routed, and where it's being stored, etc. It could be you could put it on an open market and say, okay, Amazon or Google or Apple, which of you wants to accept 1/3000th of a penny to store this information, etc. And so what we see is now instead of we become the product and all of these services are harvesting our data and then they're hawking it on the open market. Now we're saying we're actually paying for good service. So now they have an incentive to compete with each other to provide us more features that we're requesting.
Okay, so okay,
Maybe we want higher definition, etc. So
okay. So
that's
what you're
where
saying, the image that I sent somewhere to somebody, if it's going to be stored somewhere, it may be stored as in pieces like a jigsaw puzzle all over the internet by competing providers who provide the storage. So it's much safer than just stored in one server in Google or in Facebook. That's what you're saying.
exactly, and we can unlock all of those different pieces with my
Yeah.
same identity key or
Yep.
with my
Right.
same,
Okay.
so
So it can
now
be
I can recompile the
okay.
the picture like a
Yep.
jigsaw puzzle,
Okay.
and imagine that, but just at scale, at
Right.
enterprise
Yeah,
data
yeah, yeah.
level
Okay. So
scales.
that provides much better security. It's being distributed all over the place. Nobody can steal the whole thing. They might get one piece of it, but basically it's much safer in that way. So
And
I'm getting,
if I can just add one thought on this, that's why it's really important that we develop the standardization for these systems and these tools. Because now, if Google goes down and my whole security system is being run by Google, maybe I can just authenticate and certify into the Apple network. And now, for the next 24 hours, my security system is being run on Apple because I'm paying them maybe a premium to run it while Google's down. So we have these immediate level replacement services by these big providers of features, and they're incentivized to continue to research and development. So they're not incentivized to build a walled garden and go, okay, we're blocking everyone out. Now that we're Apple and we have the monopoly on all cell phones and app information, we're just going to make sure that no one else can play ball with us. They're actually incentivized to say, hey, would you like one of these? Can we build you one of these? Would it
yeah,
be better if we added
right,
one of
right.
these?
Okay, okay. Let's change. That's covered that subject reasonably well. Um, I'm interested in training courses. I've developed a small training course and delivered it once with great joy to 3 people at no charge in my shed, my carpeted lined shed. Um, it concerns me that people are going to need to know how to use BSV in the basic form of being able to buy it somehow from more than one place. That's an on-ramp to getting into BSV. They'll need to be able to store it safely somewhere, like a Electron SV wallet of their own, and they
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to withdraw it if they need to. If there's a horror about a crash of BSV or something, they want to be able to get out. Those were the 3 things that I was teaching them. One of the person out of the 3 accomplished it. The other 2 haven't yet, but they're keen to come back. I'm very, very keen to have a training course where there's perhaps 3 on-ramps, 3 storage options, and 3 outs in case one gets wiped out by government intervention or technical problem, whatever it is. So I'm very happy to be doing that. I haven't got there yet. I can now tell you of 2 ways of buying and storing and selling BSV. To sell it, I converted it into USDT, sent that to Independent Reserve, and Independent Reserve sent it to my bank account in New Zealand. So that was good. At least I could get out if I wanted to. A lot of people are scared. It's all risky stuff. So the out is just as important as the in. So that was one way. But Orange Gateway is my second. And that one you can pay by a bank transfer. You can buy USDT that way. You can send your money. You can buy US dollars, change it into BSV. I have felt it's urgent now because at any time I think that BSV can flare up in the way that I described. Just takes Musk or Zuckerberg to realize the 5 major features that will thrash their opposition and give them exclusive access to it. Because once people jump on it, the price, I expect, may skyrocket, partly because of the limited 21 million total forever, anytime, anywhere. There's never going to be more than 21 million BSV, and about 18 million of those are already bought. So what's going to happen when people really, really want it? It'd be the government departments, education department, parliamentary services, whatever. They need some to be able to do their stuff, and they have to knock on the doors of the people that own it, who are often just enthusiasts and technical geeks like us, and they're going to have to knock on our door and say, oh, here, you got some Bitcoin, some BSV. And say, yeah, well, how much would you, sell us some? I said, well, no, not really, because it's going up like lightning, pardon the pun. So that's why I say it's good to set the scene now so that anyone who believes what we're talking about, and they can check it out and argue with us if they want, if they find that it's true, they can quietly get in now, get some, and go up, and they'll be able to function with it, buy things, sell things, that sort of thing. So that's why I thought it's been important to get training courses. I don't know of any training course that's like mine, in that in about 1 hour, it can equip a person to be fully functional with BSV, either just as an investment because they want to make it, invest in it and make a lot of money, but so they can actually function with it. So that's why I think. Do you know of any other such training course? I mean, brief and simple for ordinary people. You meet a person on a bus, you say, I could give them my sheet of paper, which shows you the benefits of BSV and how to get it, store it, and get rid of it if you have to. Do you know of anything that brief, that simple, that exists?
I believe that CoinGeek has done some Bitcoin 101s and BSV 101s, which are extremely helpful. I'll drop some links with you just so we can make those available to the public and they can potentially help you with your resources. But they're very, very top to bottom, tell you everything you need to know,
Yeah,
what is the wallet, all of
it's
this stuff.
great. That's great to have that stuff. I'm an ex-IT trainer. I trained for years as a contract trainer, and I perceive at the moment we need very concise training. It should take maybe half an hour to equip a person fully to understand 5 benefits of BSV, how to buy it and where to buy it in more than one place, and how to store it safely in an Electrum SV account, or if you want, hand cash or something. And if you need to, if you get scared or there's a good reason, you need to get out. Now, that should only take quarter of an hour to half an hour to do. You should be able to explain it to a person on a bus, get them to record your voice. They go home and do it. Now, that means that if BSV does skyrocket, like Musk announces that there was some kind of Bitcoin that seemed to be very good. We've discovered it. It's called Bitcoin SV, and we're equipping X with that. From now on, every time you click a like, you're going to reward a person with 0.001 cent. And if they get 10,000 of those, they get a bit of money and they're happy and they'll keep doing content. So if that happens, all the people that have taken this very, very brief course say, oh, good, I've only got $10 in it now, but I'm going right now to my computer. I'm going to put $10,000 in there. They know about it,
It started
and
right
that
away.
can include, of course, not just greedy people like me, but it can also include the health department, the police department, the transport departments. They know about it because Jeff, who works in the transport department management, he says, "Yeah, I knew that was going to be good, so I'm going to get my boss I'm going to ring him up right now. We're going to buy $20,000 worth of BSV so we can make these transportation activities really swing along instead of being crippled." So I'm saying again, it needs to be brief, one pager, not 10 pages, not explanations. People don't want a lot of explanations. They just need the five major points with a link explaining each point. If they want to know lots and lots about it, go there. But right now, we're just telling you how to get it, how to store it, how to sell it if you have to, and the 5 reasons, scalability, speed of transactions, carbon, 1/100,000th of the carbon of a BTC transaction. I mean, that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows when people hear about it. And governments like Margaret Warren, what's her name, the senator?
Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren, yeah. I mean, they're the ones going to jump up and down moral rage hearing about BTC compared with BSV. And they're saying, you've got to get to BSV instead of the BTC. That's how it's going to go.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think that is really helpful and useful. I like the way that you explained it of just, it's kind of like you give them a fire extinguisher, right? So it's like, hey, let's just give you the one tool that you're going to need no matter what, and then we can build the rest of the house as we go. But for right now, you just have your break in case of emergency.
Right.
Here's how to get it, here's how to hold it, here's how to sell it. And then as it's the ultimate onboarding tool is actually having some, because when you can see that, oh, a penny can come and go just as easily, then you just suddenly think, well, why has no one done this before?
Right.
This is
Now
genius.
we can, by the way, if we want to be moral about this, and we do, we can favor the people who should get BSV first. For example, it would be good if the public of the United States and New Zealand were awake to this before the general population, including criminals and everything else. It'd be good if the senators understood this and at least were ready with and could buy some in advance, the real thing, not the BTC junk, but the BSV, so that when if there's a big crash, which I've often said online, I think is quite possible, lots of mistaken adoption of BTC as the real Bitcoin, at least it won't crash the economy of the government. So that, that's good. We can favor good people who are caring about the community rather than just say anyone who's in first, good on them. A quick question before we time out and have to resume again in a second is if the traffic does, as I was suggesting before, suddenly flood BSV and it reaches its limit, what kind of a scene is that? If BSV itself suffers the same sort of congestion that BTC is crippled by, even with small amounts, if let's say we went to 20 million transactions a second because just the world went crazy on X and with Zuckerberg's Facebook, and it started to fill with massive amounts of traffic. What happens? Do the transactions slow down? Does the price of a transaction cost more? Does it clog up and just cripple? What happens? Anyone know?
Well, yeah, so I think it's completely plausible and possible to think about. There would need to be some, some first of all, we're going to be discussing Terranode a little bit by talking about
Yeah,
scalability, et cetera.
yeah.
And so Terranode is a out of the box architecture, out of the box node implementation software. So basically, you can just find the software, you can just download it and run your own instance of Terranode. And Terranode gives you out of the box 1 million transactions per second. But what we've seen with services like Gorilla Pool, et cetera, there are ways you don't have to just build, or you don't just have to run a system the way that it's designed out of the box, right? Just like a vehicle, you can buy it and you can keep it stock, or you can take the engine apart. If you know what you're doing, you can add something new that gives it a turbo, et cetera. So for really clever people, and especially when there's profit motive there, so they maybe have to invest some resources, they can actually tune the node implementation so that they're able to accelerate it.
Okay.
Where exactly the line is between, we know that it can do 1 million out of the box. In optimized conditions, can it do 2 million? Can it do 5 million? Those are the things that when we have this influx of transactions, we can actually, that's when we can test that. And we can say, because what you end up learning is that when you're talking about a data throughput like the one that you're describing, 20 million transactions per second. And first of all, I'll just say that Terranode is partnered with Aerospike. Aerospike is a database company. So again, you get a completely out-of-the-box Aerospike database model that you can stand up and run on your own. You can run it on-prem, or you can run it in the cloud, et cetera. And Aerospike has customers that themselves have 320 million database calls per second. And that the company that I'm talking about, they're a French advertising data company, so they draw information from people's trends, what you're searching for and stuff. They draw it in, they analyze it, and they serve it out. So we know that it's not a question of whether or not that volume of data inquiry exists. We know it exists. There's definitely that appetite for that data throughput. Right now, that data throughput isn't interfacing with a blockchain component. It is interfacing with a database. However, again, by being able to link the blockchain and the database components, what you have is the ability to specialize these services. So maybe there's one service that's really good at ingesting data, and there's another service that's really good at outgesting data. So maybe when they're needing to be run on the same machine, the max you can get is 1 million transactions per second. But when you're able to compartmentalize those now, and you have the ingester processing 1 million, the outgester processing 1 million, when you combine that, that's now 2 million that you can process. But the problem is how do we ensure that the data they're looking at is the same data? That's where the blockchain comes in. So now you imagine that you have 1 million transactions in the ingester, 1 million transactions from the outgester. You combine that throughput, and that gives you the ability to solve 2 million transactions per second, but it's just solved through a distributed architecture instead of a monolithic architecture. But what you end up seeing is that, you may hypothesize that it works a certain way, but until you have those 20 million transactions per second coming through the system, you don't see the necessarily the problems that arise until that throughput is actually there. So I think what's the exciting part about this, it's sort of like bungee jumping, right? You can check your strap, you can check your harness, and then but you have to at a certain point stand on the edge and you have to jump, and you don't learn about what the experience of bungee jumping is like by watching a safety video or learning about it. You actually have to do it, and then unique parts about the experience come through the actual being involved and being a part. You learn what breaks when you hit those thresholds, and then you adjust and you realize, hey, maybe we were wrong about this. We need to completely scrap it and go back to the drawing board. Or maybe you realize we were right about this. All it needs is an extra component right here that can
Yeah,
check this
but that
to
that
ensure that it's
but
successful.
if you were speaking to the Senate under question about this, what you've just said would scare the hell out of a lot of senators, and they'd say we're not going to legalize the transfer from BTC to BSV because it's too risky. I'm just curious whether you can do flood testing. I used to work in telephone exchanges and telephone exchange design, and there used to be flood testing of traffic through it. So presumably you can emulate traffic. There's already been done to 1 million transactions per second or more. I'm wondering how much flood testing there is being done within the BSV fraternity and in-chain and stuff to cope with all the most likely scenarios and generalized responses that would cope with anything, so that if you're asked by Elizabeth Warren, what happens if it blows up with too much traffic? Our police departments all go down. What's going to happen? How are you going to cope with it? How confident are you can handle flood traffic? And
Yeah,
the perfect answer is we can handle 1 trillion transactions per second, which is, 1 million times more than MasterCard does. And that's even taking into account the looming Internet of Things, where as cars drive in the streets, they're picking up information, all manner of micro devices in houses, in cars, on bodies doing this. We calculated that if we made it do 1 trillion transactions per second of all kinds of that sort of stuff, we did that, and that's unlikely to happen until the year 2035. So Elizabeth Warren would say, well, maybe it's worth a try on a trial run or in parallel with what we're doing, but I still don't trust it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I see where you're coming from with that. So there have been the flood testing, and those flood tests have gone up to, 1.5 million transactions per second. And it passes with flying colors. Without getting too technical at this point of the podcast, the reason why it passes with flying colors is because of its modular design. So it has the ability to scale with increased demand. So, if you were imagining building an airport, if you have these little Cessna planes, you only need to build the runway so long, right? But if all of a sudden you find out that, hey, the government decided that we wanted to park these 747s and fly these big planes in, that's okay because you have enough flat land that you can extend the runway. But it makes no sense to extend the runway until you know that you have the demand for that. So right
Well,
now we know that we've extended the runway to 1.5 million transactions.
yeah, but I'd sort of challenge that, because I'd say in this case we're talking about what I perceive as massive flood, not just regular flood. In telephone exchanges, you do expect a lot of traffic. If there's an earthquake or something, you expect a lot of traffic. So you prepare for that, and you say, we'll put so many more group selectors or whatever they are, and we'll put them in, and it'll handle that, and then the level of service will go down. But there still will be service, because we've done things technically to make sure that at least you might have to wait for a call longer when you're waiting for it to go through, but it's going to happen. So I'm saying BSV particularly is in the digital era vulnerable to massive flood very fast. So I'm saying I hope that the fraternity of BSV, bless them, they're great people, they're doing great stuff. I hope they are saying, okay, let's get ready for the floods. And let's say that we can explain it to people like the senators and so on, so that we can cope. It has a flexibility. it might, for example, it might slow down instead of sort of 10 minutes for a transaction to go through. At worst, it might take an hour, but it's still, even the worst of conditions, a massive earthquake in California and a hurricane hitting Florida at the same time, and huge amount of traffic, fire services, rescue, all that. We imagine, even that, we know that in these circumstances, we get so many Erlangs of traffic, or whatever the traffic is in this field. We know that we can deliver the service for sure, a bit more slowly, but we can deliver it with a confidence of 98%. That's way better than what we're getting from MasterCard and Visa and stuff. So that would make the senators sit down. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, let's move on to another subject.
Sure. Well, if I could just comment on that. So
Yeah.
that is a really great point, and highlighting these doomsday scenarios and that maintaining service through those doomsday scenarios is the value proposition of distributed ledger technology. That's exactly what it is designed to do. It's designed so that, unlike Google infrastructure that can be shut down when, the center in Utah goes down
Or
or
BTC.
Apple goes down.
BTC
Yeah,
going to $150 per transaction.
exactly. And what you have is you don't have that with distributed architecture, because the logic processors, they themselves are not tied to any specific machine. They, maybe a big hurricane can hit the
Yeah,
western coast
right,
of
right.
and it might shut the entire city of
Yeah, yeah,
Portland down. You might
yeah. That
lose
that
all
that
electricity there,
yeah. That's
but
the
it doesn't
central.
impact the fact that you can run operations out of another node center
Right.
that's still on the network, and
Yeah.
all you're doing is you're
Retrafficking.
reallocating
You're
where
rerouting.
the resources are being
Yeah.
driven by, and
Yeah.
that's the exact value proposition that
This
BSV represents.
this raises the point too. I'm going to come on to now. The next topic is going to be about publicity
Yeah.
and how we get the message out. A significant part of the message that I've been delivering to ChatGPT, Copilot, Grok, Gemini, and stuff when I'm interacting with them, the AIs have been ignorant about it, and they've turned around and they've agreed with me when I've given them the five main things: scalability, speed, cheapness, transaction, carbon, and stability. They've turned around and they've said, yes, I see your point. You're right. Now, whether they are still believing that, I don't know. They certainly don't listen to and store all my information. But I think they do learn from the transactions. You could try that yourself. The other BSV fraternity people can try it too. Go into any of these AIs, ask them questions about what the AI knows about the difference between BSV and other cryptos, and see how well you get on. I was hoping that this was a way of delivering the message very effectively to millions of people, especially people like members of parliament and business leaders and things like that. If they go in there and inquire about BSV, wouldn't it be great if Grok said BSV is going to thrash BTC because scalability, carbon, cheapness of transactions, stability, security, and ability to add on tokenization, stuff like that. And the business person goes, what? I've got $20,000 worth of BTC in the bank. I'm going to quietly get out of that and get into BSV instead. Anyway, so we're now on to the subject of getting the message out. Hopefully, again, I'll say it'd be good if we got the message out to the good people of the world, the people that are taking responsibility with government, business leaders, rather than riffraff and the crooks. It'd be good if we convince them. I wanted to ask you, just before I get into the publicity stuff, when do you think Terranode is going to be fully functional and making its difference of scalability? July?
July is a good guesstimate. Yeah, I believe it's right around the corner. I think at the moment it's going through a security audit. And once it finishes through the security audit, if it needs any adjustments, it'll process those adjustments. But yeah, it should be ready. I mean, it already currently is really ready in a very alpha sense for some, private node operators. Famously, Tal mined a block on the solstice last year with Terranode. So we know that it works, that it's processing. We know that it's listening on the network. It still to this day continues to listen on the network. But what we also know is that that there will be sort of a tandem period where both SV node software and the Terranode implementation are running in parallel. So I think, yeah, there will be some restrictions there. It'd be like, imagine the front end of your car is a Ferrari and the back end is still, a buggy or something, so you're gonna not be able to fully experience the thrills of the Terranode processing power while the SV node system is still in parallel running on the network. But the
Okay, so
point of
when
running
is
them,
okay, is there going to be a time when the Terranode basically is the system and BSV just
yeah,
the ordinary network
yeah,
isn't being used?
yes, exactly. So they currently are both online right now. And then you will see SV node phase out. Once SV node is phased out, and that the reason for doing that is just to ensure that, that nothing goes down for the exact reason that you've been pointing out, that
Yeah.
we should prepare this message, which is that, it's robust. It doesn't just go offline just because of a hiccup or a hitch in the get along. So, just running them in parallel, maybe the time period would be 6 months, maybe it'll be more. I don't know exactly. But running them in parallel does make sense. But once SV node starts to be phased out, it doesn't mean that you can't run it. You'll always still be able to run SV node, but there will be just so much information that it'll be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. I mean, if you're gonna be a node on the network, you might as well run the optimal builds for the node implementation, just so that you can, because you're economically incentivized. You want to make as much money as possible because you are a profit seeking entity on the network. And so, yeah, then that will, be the period when we will really see, and that's when I think we see the influx of what we talked about before, which is the commercialization opportunities. And you brought it up, the IoT, the AI, the data syncing. We've seen recently the 402 gateway. If you're familiar with 402, famously 404 is one of the error codes that indicates that, you got to a bad gateway on, an HTTP request or something like that. So back in the day, and it's still to this day on the Wikipedia page, I encourage everyone to go and take a look at the 400 error codes. They have 500 error codes and 200 error codes, etc. But look up the 400 error codes, and they have a list of them, what they mean, what they do, etc. And there's an error code called 402, and when you hit a 402, what it says is that insufficient money was provided with the packet of information that you sent. Now, they put this into the original architecture of the internet, even though there was no native payment system that was built into the internet, because they just imagined, well, of course it's going to come along. We don't have it designed yet today, but it will naturally be here soon. But instead, what we saw was what you might describe as like a band-aid approach or like a bolt-on approach, which is, instead of building an infrastructure at the base layer of the internet using these HTTP requests, etc., where you can actually send the money as a component. For example, in the header of the packet of information itself, there can be, just like you would add a stamp to a letter, you add a payment to a packet of data that you send on the network. And it doesn't proceed to the next point on the network unless it has its stamp. Just like a letter that you drop in the mailbox with no stamp would not go to the destination. So this has been built in, but there just hasn't been a native payment system that has existed. Instead, what you have is these very insecure methods of, you have to enter all your credit card details into the
Yeah, okay.
website and all
Okay,
this
anyway,
stuff,
but,
and it's
but
terrible.
to summarize what you're saying, are you saying that that problem has been solved with both BSV and the Terranode, so that a transaction, even if there's a massive flood tomorrow, the people would still get their transaction through, albeit perhaps more slowly, I don't know, and they would surely get their money through. They would not make a loss.
Correct. Yeah, it's information and architecture that is designed to support an information superhighway. They used
Right.
to call it
Okay.
that,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Okay.
now, right now, what we have is an information
Yeah,
one
sure.
lane horse
Now,
and buggy road.
when you're talking about security testing that's going on right now, does that include flood testing and diverse circumstances? Have they said, wow, we didn't realize it could go to 30 million a second and then to 200 million a second in a week? This is the world we live in now with AI and with telecommunications and with Elon Musk around and exponential change. Has this security testing included such diverse flood testing to massive levels to the point where you could stand in the Senate, you, Brett, could stand in the Senate if asked as a technical advisor and say, we have planned for this. We have done figures on the Internet of Things, according to Tony Seba or other experts. We expect the traffic in transactions or payments per second to be X, Y, and Z in the year 2027, 2028, 2029, 2035. We've coped with those. We've coped with a hurricane like Katrina and a simultaneous massive fire in California. We've done all of that all at once. And the worst thing that happened was the transaction time went from 10 minutes worst to 20 minutes worst. No money was ever lost. There was never confusion. People could always do their payments. Could you say that? Could you stand in the Senate and say that?
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. And however, I want to maybe clarify that the security audit is different than the flood testing. So the flood testing that was done in May of 2024, and all of the information is available in public. You can go on terranode.bsvblockchain.org and you can access the testing. It was done in collaboration with Amazon Web Services, AWS.
Yeah.
So 1.1 million transactions per second sustained across 2 weeks. And yes, all of that stuff was modeled, and currently the security audit is more about a code review than it is about testing for hypothetical scenarios.
Right. Anyway, if you end up standing on the Senate floor like Zuckerberg had to, you remember Zuckerberg having to appear in the Senate, explain about privacy of data. He was humble. Yep. He wore a grey suit and a grey tie, and he was very humble and so on. So you'd have to be like that. But if you were there,
hey, I'm available. If the Senate's listening right now, I mean, call me up.
There may be
Bruce. He'll put you in touch with me.
There may be staff of the Senate people there who watch this, or enthusiasts who have a brother.
Yeah.
You never know.
They want to learn.
What I'm saying is, if you're there, you'd better be ready for such questions. And you say, could you put up slide 23? It shows you the traffic in Internet of Things forecasted by Tony Seba and by Peter Diamandis and by Ray Kurzweil on these years. The consensus of those is X tera transactions per minute, etc. And our system can cope with twice that. And it's verified by, some authority, which will be respected, and that authority too. Now, that means whoever's challenged you in the Senate, and they may be doing it for political reasons, they may be just trying to put you down. You say, there is the data. If you want to challenge it, there are my sources. It's not just coming out of my confidence. It's come out of our security testing and our flood testing. So I respectfully wish that you would examine that and challenge the sources if you want to. But that is my understanding from our rigorous testing, because we care about America as much as you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's extremely important. And this, the modeling that you're describing, you're not describing something that is just hypothetical. This is really going on right now, especially in Europe, as they're modeling all of these things with Mika and with the digital passport, so yeah, absolutely 100% what you're saying is extremely valuable when we're talking to regulators.
When you appear at a hearing, as I'm describing, you have to be concise, you have to be authoritative with your sources, and you have to be polite. So you need to be able to support every word you say. They say, who did this? When did they do it? How many different people did that testing? Not just one, not just your friends. Who else did it? So you've got to be ready pinned down if it's you or your colleague beside you, whatever, you need to be able to do that stuff real fast, really concise. Your slideshow shouldn't be more than maybe 10 slides, and all the references branch off to other stuff if they want. The senators are dealing with everything. They're dealing with policing, they're dealing with health and hygiene and all kinds of stuff. You are 20 minutes of their day, and then they get on to 100 other things. If you are well equipped, you can equip BSV for adoption by the government and from everybody watching. There'll be millions of people watching that, and a lot of those are business people. Anyway, let's move on.
Anyway, or if I could just add a comment to what you just said there, just to frame so that you understand exactly that we are pursuing those exact models. So when we were initially preparing our flood testing, et cetera, we looked at this and we had a roadmap of preparing it with 4 distributed nodes. And when we were working in partnership with the IEEE, they are, an authoritative body, and the IEEE looked at our model and they said, 4 nodes is not sufficient. We don't consider 4 nodes to be sufficiently distributed network. If you want to do this testing, you need to do it with at least 6 nodes, and they need to be at least X numbers of kilometers apart around the globe. And so we listen to the advice of the IEEE. So, we are all the time trying to meet and we are the benchmark for these standards. There's no competitor to the performance that we can provide. But that being said, it is important for us to work better with industry bodies and with authoritative bodies so that again, like you said, it's not just us and our cousin and our dog that's saying that we're the best, but we're showing you that we did it and we performed it up to the FASB standards or the IEEE standards, et cetera, and that our benchmark is unbeatable.
That sounds very good. If you use the word IEEE, that is really good. Because they are very authoritative, and you can give names as well. You can say the director so and so of IEEE signed that their department had checked that out. That's the kind of stuff that politicians love to have, because they're going to have to talk to their constituents in town halls and stuff like that. So you can help a lot by getting your stuff together. You're a communications guy for BSV, so that's a really good role for you. I wanted to ask you another quick question about running things in parallel. Let's say that Bell Canada decided that BSV was really a good way to do a lot of its charging per second instead of per minute or whatever it does, and decides we're considering BSV. How credible, in general terms, is it that they would be able to do a system in parallel with their existing one without disturbing their existing one, that proved that BSV was superb for dealing with the traffic and much better than their existing system?
Very, very easy, extremely easy, because of the accessibility of the public blockchain. I mean, you can just go. You could do it in consultation with us. We can advise you. Here's what we would do. Here's how we would say to set up your sandbox and to test your environment. But you don't even need to have our consultation because it's completely public blockchain.
That answers the question.
Download the documentation online, read how to do it, and just start testing it yourself. And then based on the results, you could say, this is our preparation.
All right, okay, that's good. I asked that question because it's a security question. If people are going to take on things, they'll be thinking of not jeopardizing their existing operation. Their existing operation may not be perfect, but boy, it works and it puts money in the bank and it puts bread on the table and it keeps the customers happy. So they're not going to want to say, oh, let's try BSV and see if it works. They're going to say, we're going to do our entire operation in background virtually, and we're going to try that for 3 months, and then we'll bring some of it on scale, and then we'll switch over permanently within 6 months. So you're saying that's credible?
That's credible, and you bring up a really great point, because another example of what you're describing is to build it in phases. Maybe you don't start with micropayments right out the gate. Maybe what you start with is data authentication or data verification, right? And all of a sudden, your developer team, they start to use the technology, and then they go, "Wow, did you realize we're only using it, for this, but you can use it for all of this as well."
Right.
So So it's really about the multiplicity of the use cases that gives BSV such a huge advantage.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on more to publicity. So far, we've been talking about publicity even through the Senate, because I can easily see it going there because there's a great dispute about it. And in this case, there's a lot of controversy about it, as there was with Facebook and privacy and use of data. Here we're talking about the BTC versus BSV acrimony and confusion, disinformation, so on. So our presentation to the public and the politicians has to be superb, polite, well-informed, well-supported, clear, and concise. It has to be all those things. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about was next was active publicity. I know that there are good efforts being done to talk to businesses and so on. At one stage, I suggested, half comic, half humorously, that there be a demonstration outside MicroStrategy, which is a lion for BTC, and that it exposed the questions about BTC. I'm cautious about that because it can create tremendous hostility. It can cause uproar and hostility, and the people doing such a demonstration could even be arrested. So I'm very careful about that. But I know the power of media. I've read Ogilvy on advertising, and I've taught a little bit of advertising. So I know that an idea can be so dramatic. You know the word meme? A meme is an idea that is so dramatic that it spreads, no matter whether it's useless or not. You can have a dog doing something. It's not important the dog did that thing. It's just that people thought it was cute and it got spread widely, and it advertised that dog. And if that dog was a commercial product, then boy, oh boy, did it sell. So I'm thinking that if there are any creative people in the BSV fraternity, I'd be glad to talk with them if the in-chain and the real players here didn't mind it, to actively draw attention to the 5 factors of BSV that count. I'll give an example of not a very good demonstration. One could be that you either get volunteers or you pay people to dress up in clown suits. One of the chief clowns is labeled BTC, and the other one is labeled BSV. Now, the BSV is clubbing the other one with a balloon club and shouting, can't scale, can't scale. And BTC is doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Big, huge carbon. And you know what I mean? And the crowd would gather around laughing at this. And they said, what the hell's going on here? That's the kind of thing that would certainly hit local headlines, and it would hit business headlines too, because it's funny, not because it's true necessarily, but because it's funny. And people would say, well, what do they mean it can't scale? And you have 2 or 3 people around the perimeter, or 10 people around the perimeter, handing out leaflets, explaining it and giving the references. Now, that's the kind of thing that I would think, if we are confident that BSV can do what it claims, and you've quite eloquently explained to me that you think that it can, then it's ready for such scrutiny and perhaps rapid, massive uptake. So what do you think about that? What do your peers think about that? I get the impression that most of the BSV fraternity, and even Craig Wright, bless him, I think that they are technical people, but they have no idea of handling the media. They are just techies. They really don't do much. Even worse, they are hostile and look quite ugly often with their malice and fighting and stuff, ignorant of the eyes that are on them, and are condemning them for that reason and rejecting BSV for those reasons. So I'm saying I'd like to meet a few people from N-Chain and the Bitcoin Association who are media savvy, who are creative, imaginative people. They probably wear dreadlocks. They probably are gay, whatever it is. But these are creative people, and they get together with me in a discussion, and we say, this is the demonstration we'll do outside MicroStrategy. This is the one we're going to do outside the SEC. This is the one we're going to do here. It's going to last 5 minutes. This is the players, only a few. You're going to have cameras there. It's going to go on social media. People are going to laugh and laugh and laugh rather than hate and hate and hate. And people are going to watch They're going to learn. They're going to listen. So that's the kind of thing. I'll hear you. What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, so my feeling about it is I think that you're really capturing something that is very true, and maybe it's something that oftentimes gets linked with, um, much younger generations. The younger generations are way more savvy about the cultural memes, the cultural zeitgeists of the moment, and the ability to send something viral. A lot of times we try to logically think about what would make something go viral,
Yeah.
and in a weird way, it's almost this anti-rational concept around virality, because a lot of times things become viral because they are quite dumb or they're quite silly, like what you were just describing with the clowns, and yet you can use these to convey messages. So it's the silliness and the stupidity of it. And I think that this is something that it's a component of the new media and the new generation of information traveling that we really need to better understand. So I celebrate your out of the box thinking when it comes to this, because, and it doesn't mean that we want to only do our messaging that way, right? It's not like you put all of your eggs in one basket, but it doesn't hurt to have a more zany TikTok
Right. Okay.
approach to
Um,
information traveling.
Okay, there's two parties that I'd like to talk with. Number one is people like you who are in the Bitcoin, the BSV fraternity technically, and who highly respect logic, reason, and calm. Those are essentials in truth, in coding. We're used to that for decades and decades. So those people are not usually very creative or imaginative or even brave. Well, they're brave. They're brave in bringing out product. But that's the first one. The first thing is to get people like you and other logic and people, programmers, developers, business people in that fraternity who are more technically and logically inclined to talk with me about whether they approve, whether they accept it, whether they think it would do harm or not. That's the first one. If they agree that it's worth a try, even in a small scale, and that they would have say so on whether it proceeded, the next stage is getting together with the handful of creative people amidst them who are also excellent programmers, developers, business people, whatever, but who have zing imagination, who are humorous, who can be funny, who know how people, they've got really good social skills, and they know they can help me with what would work outside MicroStrategy or the SEC or the Capitol even, what would work to put it in the headlines. Now, I'm confident I can put things in the headlines. Many years ago, there was a problem with boy racer cars here, blaring around the streets every 90 seconds on average. There was a blaring going, ah, like that when you're trying to talk to a friend on the sideway. I got very annoyed with that. And to cut a long story short, I started a group called Citizens Against Rowdy Motoring, CARM, C-A-R-M. And cut a long story short, I and others throughout the country got the law changed so that cars could be fined for doing that and so on. So it cut it out. There's still a little bit of a turnout now and again. But I'm saying one of the things I did there was I did a demonstration where a handful of us went out with pretend trombones saying, big bore, waff off, big bore, waff off. Big bore mufflers, warrant of fitness off, waff off. So anyway, it worked. Now that was a good idea, and it worked. We were on the front page of the Manitou Evening Standard every day that week, I think, and it kept going. I had a public meeting, and then I went down to the select committee in Wellington at government, presented the case along with others down in Dunedin and so on. Anyway, they changed the law. They've even crushed cars. So the law can be changed. But I'm saying a good idea. I don't want this thing to be negative. There's been so much negativity in this field. It has to be humorous. It has to be affectionate. We have to take losses. We have to be insulted and just smile or tolerate it. If you're standing in front of the Senate, you're not going to have much. You're not going to have much honor. You are going to be a faithful servant of America answering to its top representatives. So the same sort of thing. We can be very funny with our demonstration, but it cannot echo the acrimony and nastiness that has been going on recently. We've got to downplay that. We've got to be a lot more humble. I find that Craig Wright has been very frustrated and abused in his past to the point of actively trying to take his own life and being hospitalized for that. So I can understand his bitterness, but we can't let that be expressed in a way that obstructs BSV. We've got to change, and we've got to do things in a way. I think I would like to see demonstrations of the kind I've described, and maybe other techniques as well, created with the permission of the BSV fraternity by the creative people. I'd help people do this. I can give good ideas. And remember, today we have Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot. We've got those marvelous AIs to help us. You can ask any question about publicity. You say, I want you to be David Ogilvy and his team for a campaign that is generous, friendly, and inspiring and lifts the hearts of everybody who experiences it. But it wows the whole of the world, America and the world, with the power, the coming power of BSV. And it doesn't necessarily crash BTC. It might, but we'll have to take that into account as part of the strategy. That's what I'd like to see. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a very, youthful take on a new media problem. I think the organizations that are adapting to this new media style of using TikTok and Instagram and some of these other ways to build wider networks so that you're sharing that information among your peers, et cetera, much quicker, much more easily. And especially if there's video content that's humorous, yeah, maybe you send it to your mom or send it around to a couple friends or something like this. It's the organizations that really understand that it's an attention economy. Mark Wilcox talks about this all the time. He's also New Zealander, very famous New Zealander involved in the data economy ecosystem with 21E8, the magic number company. And yeah, he talks about, it's an attention economy. So the ability to specialize in attention, and that is an attention that you can extend out, but you don't need to. You can make a self-sustaining attention
Right.
where, this is something that meditation is a good example of building self-sustaining
Yeah.
attention, where your attention is helping to improve your ability to pay attention,
Yeah.
so, that's where our world is trending towards. We're trending towards more and more information, more and more self-awareness, more ability to express humility. I think that you're also very accurate in saying that, while we may be bitter about certain components of, our story, we don't want to lead with that bitterness
So
because it
something
isn't
something you
necessarily the
just
best.
something you just said struck me, and that was you talk about making it more sort of community. I think the ideal would be that the whole campaign of demonstrations, whatever it is, be in nature generous and inspiring and what's the word? Communing. That is positive in saying, let's go into this world, not so much condemning it, like the clowns with rubber truncheons and stuff. I might not favor that because it involves violence. We don't want that. But I like the idea of let's go. I'd have to talk with other people in a brainstorm about this in a way that people say, wow, wow, let's go. And we're all together. The one thing that we need now is unity.
Yes.
And if it can have that flavor, as well as being very funny, this is going to make life so much better for us. It can be done as well as being very dramatic. It's pretty easy to make, clowns club each other with balloons and stuff, but it's still got a tinge of violence there. So we'd have to find a way creatively of showing the damage, the bad factors of BTC, or mainly highlighting the dramatic better qualities of BSV over BTC. I think that can be done. I've done enough creative stuff. I've had many a campaign in media over my life. I think that can be done. But even if it was done with comical clowns with obviously balloon truncheons, not hurting anybody, even if it was done with that, this is one of my first ideas. I think that it can hit lots of headlines. It can get the news out there, and it can get people inquiring and adopting it. One thing I wanted to ask, you've probably had enough of now, but I wondered whether if the BSV fraternity, enough of them, the principals involved, the principals that is, felt it was a good idea, would they fund it if it needed funding? Because funding puts it into a new dimension, both in, they're just doing it to make money, but also it can mean you get on to Fox News and MSNBC, by doing it outside them or whatever. You can move people from here to there all over the country to do it. Now, my understanding is, funnily enough, Craig Wright, I don't know if he agreed with this, he must own a huge amount of BSV and a huge amount of money. Now, whether he's able in the circumstances to pay for it, I don't know. But funding is another dimension to consider, because at the moment, huge amounts of funding is being put into developing it and making sure it's safe. And in any other business enterprise, there is always some money spent on communications. And I don't know what you may be doing, mostly for volunteering, maybe paid staff, I don't know. What I'm saying is, I don't see much evidence, I haven't seen much evidence of communications money being spent on really getting BSV out there. Now, I've challenged you during this interview to say, would it work if there was a flood of BSV on acceptance? Now, the impression I got from you and others is that BSV will withstand a flood, and diverse flood at that, in all kinds of ways, and you can account for that. You could explain that to the Senate if you had to. So it sounds as though it's trustworthy. The product is trustworthy. So the next stage is nobody knows about it. In fact, they're arguing about it, and they've invested $2 trillion in the wrong version. We haven't yet figured out totally what we're going to do about the hurt that will happen if people do flood out of BTC into BSV. That's another thing we'd talk more about. I've talked about that on my other videos, if you want to talk about it, but that hasn't been addressed well, I think, in the conversation. People are saying, if only BSV would pick up and get big uptake. But I don't see much discussion of how much damage and carnage and who's going to be held responsible for that, who will react to that. I haven't heard a lot of discussion about that, but these are other things. The main point of this discussion here was whether or not a deliberate media campaign through demonstrations or others through regular advertising, Salesforce, for example, put $100,000 into them, see what they'd do. Boy, oh boy, I'll bet you Salesforce could do something with BSV. And it's only 100K. I mean, in the scale of things, that's not that much in the size of the value of BSV in its future, let alone the moral value to society of implementing BSV. So when you're talking to your buddies, talk to them about the value of spending on comms to get the message out. Now that it's built, instead of saying, I'll knock on a door of this grocery store here and see if you'd like to use BSV, we've got to be knocking on the doors of Microsoft, of Google, of IBM. We've got to be knocking on all the doors, and we say, we'll demonstrate at no charge that you can parallel run this and it'll halve your costs, because we've done a bit of homework on this. So those are other things. But I think the one way to get attention, as we've been just talking about, is demonstrations that will cause memes to flood all over the internet. The product seems ready. It could be worth a go. But I encourage you to talk to your comrades and see what they think about this. Remembering most of them are coding geeks, logical. They're not creatives. So keep your eye out for the creatives, the ones who dress funny when they come into work, the ones that are gay, the ones that are different, the ones that laugh a lot and make good jokes, the ones with humor. Those kinds of people, keep your eye open for those. One in about 10 people are like that. One in about 20 people. They are the people who might help me make it happen if it gets approved by the BSV fraternity. That's probably enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I like where you're coming from with that. One of the things that I am taking away from your suggestions is just, not being afraid to be different and not being afraid to be ourselves because, we are something as a network, as an ecosystem that is truly, revolutionary. And, one of the worst ways, they say that you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, right? So, if we're afraid to get up off to pull our backs off of the back of the wall in the basketball gym and go ask the girl to dance, then we might miss the opportunity to have a beautiful life, and so we just need to, we need to get the confidence that, comes from seeing the flood test, knowing that we can speak under oath and that we're not trying to BS or trying to pull anything over on
Right.
anyone.
Yeah.
You
One
know,
quick thing. One quick
yeah,
thing. You rightly say that people are afraid, especially people who are more logical and don't want to take too much risk. But remember, just as we can knock on a door of a big corporation and say, well, just do it safely in parallel on a small scale. We can do the same thing with this new approach to the media. We could try it in one town. We could try it in Cincinnati outside a particular business, see what the crowd reaction was. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be a small thing. See what works, see what doesn't. It can be great fun.
yeah, I agree 100%. And we can learn from it, and I think that, my dad used to say that success is a habit and so is losing. So we try it in a small town, we see what works, we see what doesn't. We build off of that and we continue to do that. Bruce, it was wonderful to join you today and as always catch up like old friends and be able to look forward to a future that's running on BSV.
Good on you. Thank you for participating. It was great to talk. Thank you.
My
Bye.
pleasure. See you guys next time.
Bye.